Please join me in welcoming our panelists for A Bug in the System, Fixing the Technology Sector's Inclusion Problem. Ron Gonzales, President and CEO of the Hispanic Foundation of Silicon Valley. Sarah Kunst, CEO of ProDay.co. Laura Gomez, CEO and founder of Atipica. Tony Maldonado, Executive Creative Director of the IGRP Insignia Entertainment Group. Neil Green, President and General Manager of Intel Federal LLC and Vice President at the Data Center Group. And our moderator, Dr. Avis Jones-DeWeever, President and CEO of Incite Unlimited LLC and founder of the Exceptional Leadership Institute for Women.
We're about to get started now, I think, with a very, very critically important discussion. You know, I would have to say that if you think about the entire American labor force, there's probably no space within it that is more in need of an infusion of inclusion than the tech industry. From the quote-unquote bro culture, right, to the reality that this is an institution or an industry that for decades has relied on the excuse that somehow they just can't find any qualified people of color, aside from Asian Americans, to be able to infuse into their labor market. We know that's not true. And so today we've amassed for you an amazing set of individuals. I would characterize them, quite frankly, as a power panel that's going to discuss this issue in depth with some nuance to really get down to the good, the bad, and the ugly as it relates to inclusion within tech. And beyond that, we're going to really take the very important leap to really look ahead and think about what needs to happen next to ultimately make change. And so with that said, I want to begin by briefly introducing each one of these amazing panelists. I'm going to start to my far left with Mr. O'Neill Green. He's the Vice President of the Data Center Group and President and General Manager of Intel Federal LLC. As Vice President, he is someone who is responsible for the overall financial management and revenue growth and increasing the presence of Intel solutions in the federal government and beyond. Join me in welcoming Mr. Green. Next is Laura Gomez. She is CEO and founder of Atipica, which is a venture-backed startup and founding member of Project Include. She has worked at Google, at YouTube, at Jawbone, and Twitter, where she was a founding team member and international team member, which led to Twitter's production expansion into 50 languages and dozens of countries. Join me in welcoming Ms. Gomez. So seated next to her is Tony Maldonado. He is the Executive Creative Director of IGRP Insignia Entertainment. And he's also an Apple shareholder and an Executive Creative Director at IGRP, which is a boutique London and New York-based production company that operates out of studios globally. Join me in welcoming Mr. Maldonado. To my immediate right is Mr. Ron Gonzales. He's the President and CEO of the Hispanic Foundation of Silicon Valley. He has over 35 years of technology and public policy experience. And prior to leading the Hispanic Foundation, he was the founder, chairman, and CEO of Insignia LLC. Thank you, and join me in welcoming Mr. Gonzales. And to my far right is Sarah Kunst. She is the CEO of ProDay.co, a subscription personal training fitness app that allows users to exercise alongside professional athletes and fitness celebrities. She is a 2015 Forbes 30 Under 30 winner and a contributing editor at Marie Claire magazine. Thank you. Great, so I want to start with Mr. Green. I understand that at Intel, you are sort of breaking out of the pack in terms of doing some very innovative and impactful things as it relates to improving the state of diversity and inclusion in your company. And so I'm wondering, what are you at Intel doing differently that other people need to take note of and perhaps replicate at their institutions?
Good. Yeah, we have a 5-pillar strategy at Intel to drive diversity and inclusion. Pillar 1 is focused on getting to full representation by 2020. So that means hiring at universities or from universities that we hadn't historically focused in the past. It means going to conferences. It means just showing up in places where the diverse talent pool exists. The second strategy that we're going after is building the pipeline of students that are interested in STEM fields that can come and work at Intel and other companies in the tech industry, right? So investing in high school curriculum like at Oakland Oakland Unified School District, partnering with industry partners such as the Hispanic Foundation of Silicon Valley to help build curriculum, help build the pipeline for students that are knowledgeable and interested in technology and can participate in this big marketplace. The third pillar of our strategy is increasing the diverse supply chain. So in 2015, roughly about $250 million of Intel spend was on diverse-owned companies. Our goal is by 2020 to increase that to about $1 billion of spend in diverse companies. Our fourth pillar is how do we grow the amount of entrepreneurs, minority-owned, women-owned companies, startups, how do we fund them? So we decided to put $125 million fund aside to go build these types of organization. And the fifth pillar of our strategy is how do we ensure a very inclusive online environment? How do we help prevent or educate against cyberbullying? How do we drive for a much more inclusive type environment? So those are the 5 pillars that we've set our diversity and inclusion strategy around. And I can go into really details on any of the 5 pillars, but that's what we've put out. We're seeing some successes. We're not happy with the results just yet. It's not going fast as fast as I would like to see it go, but we're making progress, and others in the Valley are taking notice, and it's creating a conversation that we hope can proliferate broader than just the Valley.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Really laying out that very detailed and multi-pronged strategy, which I think is necessary. Just one bullet isn't going to make a difference.
Exactly. Exactly.
Laura, your company has a very sort of interesting technique that it uses to measure where companies are as it relates to these issues. Can you sort of describe that really quickly?
I've been in tech since I was 17, and I've been in about 3 years ago when tech started releasing their numbers, diversity numbers of their employees, race and gender. I was asked to be on several panels. And after on a panel with the Reverend Jesse Jackson and the heads of Facebook and Google and the editor-in-chief of USA Today, everybody was talking about the pipeline and the pipeline issue. There weren't enough women, or there weren't enough African Americans or Latinos. And so I decided that the same technologies that we're using to either look at how data and machine learning was being utilized in those pipelines. So my startup focuses on looking at the resume and then comparing, looking at public data, government data, as well as labor, EOC, Social Security, and then comparing that against the information in the resume to predict gender and race, so that we can really thoroughly understand how the pipeline is and how the pipeline is broken. And we have some of our top tech clients looking at that in a way that allows it to be, to really pinpoint where the gap is. And it's not just talking about women in tech, but talking about non-tech roles as well as it relates to diversity.
Mm-hmm. Great, and we're certainly going to delve down more deeply into that because that's very interesting. Mm-hmm. Tony, I'm very interested in the work that you're doing as a shareholder at Apple. You have challenged the organization to do a better job when it relates to diversity and inclusion, but you're running up into a bit of resistance, interestingly.
Correct.
So can you tell us a little bit about your experience, what you're pushing for, and why you think you're receiving such pushback?
I would say that being involved in this project with a group of people to bring this proposal up to Apple was quite challenging for several reasons. I would say primarily the biggest stumbling block is the fact that it's a social issue. Mm. And as it's a social issue, most corporate heads tend to just close their eyes and close their ears because there's too much noise, okay? And no one has bothered to really challenge them on the business side, mm-hmm. the economics of it, of diversity. And without bringing that attention to the corporate heads, they're really not going to listen. Okay, so when we're asking for certain data sets from them and certain matrix, and we're presenting them also with proven data that gives, for instance, the economics of the wealth of people of color around the world and the markets that they target and how it can influence their future, they seem to open up a little bit. However, we received a lot of resistance, especially myself, over the past 3 years, again, due to the fact that diversity and inclusion in the public realm is more of a social issue. So it turns out that many people believe that this cause is affirmative action. So there's a lot of pushback on that because nobody wants that. Okay, I encountered resistance from Hispanics, blacks, and everyone, believe it or not, because of the fact that it feels like it's tokenism. When in fact, if people read my proposal and all the arguments we were making in public, in the public media, it was actually a reverse of affirmative action. Okay, no awards of tokenism of any kind to anyone, but making sure that it's equality overall, regarding gender and everything else, and that's what makes the difference in this.
Absolutely. So it sounds like there's still a lot of education that needs to go on just around the business case.
That's very true, and it's globally. We need to do this on both the economic business side and also on the social side, so that we can merge the two and understand where we're coming from. Because right now we have too many voices out there, everyone's screaming for something, and it doesn't make any sense. And that's what we need to do, have clarity for everyone. So unfortunately, maybe in bullet points, for everyone to understand this is how we move forward.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Robert, I am interested.
Ron.
Sorry, Rob.
Ron.
Ron, sorry.
That's all right. Starts with an R.
Got it. So, I was close, right? I find that what you're doing with the Hispanic Foundation is very sort of rubber to the road, sort of practical strategies to really make a difference. So I'm interested in knowing, given the challenges that we've sort of described here, particularly with regards to there's the reality of resistance to making change. There's a cultural change, there's this idea that we're doing something, that there's this lack of understanding of the business case. What have you been successful at doing to help organizations be able to open their eyes, open up, and actually make a difference?
Well, first of all, good morning. It's great to be with you in our nation's capital. And on the issue, I think the one thing that I would say, in addition to what Tony said, it is a business case. And one of the things I learned in sales and marketing working for Hewlett-Packard is that customers buy solutions. And we have to better frame this whole subject around a solution. This is about their future workforce. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, along with the Society of Human Resources last year, did a study on the future workforce in the Hispanic community. And I've seen a lot of this data before, and you probably have also, with all different minority groups, how important we are to the future workforce. But one factoid just, grabbed my attention, and that was that by 2025, the report said by 2025, 1 out of every 2 people entering the workforce is going to be Hispanic. Now, when I first read that, I think, 2025, it's kind of like out there 2050. It's only 8 years from now, folks. 1 out of every 2 people are going to be Hispanic. Now, I'm going to tell you, whether it's the CEO of Apple or Google or Yahoo, I bet you they don't know that data point. Because if they did, they'd be much more aggressive in this area as a business case, as a business solution. So that's what we try to sell to those very companies with our Latinos in Technology initiative that we launched 2 years ago. It's a very robust solution, local. We are about growing our own engineers, our own computer scientists, both Latino and Latina, from our own neighborhoods. And these neighborhoods are literally down the street from these corporate headquarters. And I'll have to tell you, we've had a pretty good response, but the leader in that response, and Neil is very lucky to work for Intel, they're our largest investor. They stepped up to the plate. Our goal was to help 100 college juniors and seniors graduate from a university in the United States in a STEM degree program. And Intel stepped up and said, we will pledge to support 25 of those 100 students each year for 5 years. That amounted to close to a $4 million investment in our program. Wow. And yeah, give Intel a round of applause, let me tell you.
That's great.
And I have to tell you, that was my first sales call. So when I walked out of that office, I was jumping up and down. I thinking, man, we hit a grand slam. No, I didn't hit a grand slam. I hit the wall, not the one the guy down the street wants to build. You know, I hit the wall of corporate high-tech community. And aside from another investment from Reed Hastings of Netflix and some other smaller investments, we've not met our goal. You know, we're stuck at about 50 to 60 students a year. Now that's movement, but in a place like Silicon Valley with its wealth and its needs, it's piddlings. And I'm not proud to say that, but you know, at least we've started that effort. So, you know, it is about trying to get people to understand what's happening in their own backyards, and in this case, what's not happening. And I'm going to tell you, most minority kids in our region, even in a place like Silicon Valley, have no clue of what's going down the street from where they live or where they go to school. If you poll Latino kids in middle school in Silicon Valley and ask them, what does an engineer do you know what they're going to tell you? They drive a train or they build a bridge. That's frightening. And so we're trying to change that view. We're trying to take the blinders off our young people to make them understand that opportunity is down the street. Their opportunity, their future, their ability to change not just their career, but the entire trajectory of their family, and in many cases, the entire community where they live. So that's what we work on.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great work.
Thank you.
Sarah, so you're in this app development space, which to me, I can hardly think of a more sort of bro culture type of space than app development. So can you tell me a little bit about your experiences of piercing into that space and what you see once you got there in terms of what needs to be changed to make it more inclusive of a more diverse set of people?
Yeah, I mean, I was in a sorority in college. I went to Michigan State University, so I spent a lot of time with like actual bros. And what's going on in tech are not a bunch of frat boys who are like giving you warm beer. It's systemic racism and sexism, which I personally feel like is worse. So, you know, I think that we try to like ascribe this idea of like, oh, they're just bros. Like, that's like a small problem. That's not the problem. The problem is sort of what everybody's been touching on, which is the systemic disenfranchisement. Like, if anybody in here is unclear that I most likely am black and a woman, please raise your hand and like we can get you a closer seat, right? It's not hard to see the people that you're not hiring. Well, it is very hard to see if you like close your eyes and plug your ears and you're like, la la la, I can't see you till you're a white dude. But that's not like, it's not hard to find us, and it's not hard to put us into your accelerators, put us into, you know, C-suites at your company, put us into, I mean, the fact that Laura has just her first name at Twitter is in Silicon Valley because we're very lame there, like a badge of honor that obviously like you were in very early. Anybody who sees that on Twitter and then sees that she does stuff in tech should be like, okay, I'm gonna go recruit her to do something, anything, because she's important in tech. And if it was Tom and she was a white dude, that would be happening on like a constant basis. So the reason that these things aren't happening, the reason that app development culture and tech culture in general, especially consumer tech culture, is so toxic isn't because they can't see us or there's not a unified message or, you know, whatever else. It's systemic overlooking. And so I walk into rooms and I'm maybe one of the most qualified people there. I personally feel like I'm always the most interesting person there, and you're still overlooked because people aren't looking for you. And so I don't think that there's, app development is particularly challenging because there's only two places to distribute your app in America and most of the world. One is the Android App Store, the other one is the Apple App Store. Do you know how you get featured in the Apple App Store? You know a dude who works at Apple. So if you don't know a dude who works at Apple who wants to do you a favor, then you don't get featured in the App Store. If you don't get featured in the App Store, you're paying $3 an app install to maybe at the least to try to get app installs. If you get featured, you get 100,000 installs essentially for free on average. So that means that like being a white dude who knows a white dude is literally outside of any other time in your life worth $300,000 a pop right there. Right? So like, I'd like my check, please, Apple. And it's insane the way that that works. And so that is a lot of the problem, is that it's not hard to build an iPhone app, right? It is not hard to build an iPhone app. It is not hard to do a lot of things in tech. The problem is that the barriers are so insurmountable that no matter how well we do it, until there's a white dude there ready to walk you through the door and say, okay, you get the nod, you don't get very far.
Looks like you have one more thing for your to-do list with Apple done.
Definitely. I'll make sure to bring that up to Tim.
Okay. So, Neil, it's interesting with the sort of relationship that you already have existing with Ron. To me, that's the prime example of the need to sort of fertilize that pipeline, and he's helping you to do that. With all the different pillars that you're focusing on there, right now, which one do you think is the most promising, and which one do you think needs the most help?
Well, the one that I spend the most time on, inside of Intel, we have an organization called the Intel Black Leadership Council. It's the senior-most black employees in the corporation. We also have an Intel Hispanic Leadership Council, Intel Network of Executive Women, INU, IBLC, IHLC. And we spend a lot of our time on two key areas, recruitment and retention. So in the past, recruiting from historically black colleges and universities and HACUs weren't necessarily the first place that Intel thought about showing up and being on campus and taking resumes and talking with the students there. That's changed over the last 2 to 3 years. We're spending a lot more time recruiting from the universities that graduate engineers like me that look like me. So I'm really proud of that. Number two, we're spending a lot of time on, once we get these employees into Intel, how do we keep them into Intel? And I've hired non-engineers, a couple of MBA students from Howard University, brought them out to Santa Clara, California, and one left after a year, the second one left after 2 years. They didn't have the community, they didn't have the support system, they were far away from family. So there's some inherent things, some inherent disadvantages being so far away from home. And that's where organizations like the Black Leadership Council, the Hispanic Leadership Council, INU, is really focused on helping them to get established, coaching, mentoring, helping them to understand how success is defined at Intel, what are the things they've got to do to make sure that they succeed. So I'm proudest of those two areas, is the recruitment and the retention. Where I would personally like to see more room is the progression. When I look at the amount of black vice presidents at Intel, it's 10 to maybe 12 out of a couple hundred, 200-300 vice presidents. When I look at the most senior position at Intel from a technical perspective is a fellow. We have no black fellows, right? We have probably 70 or 80 fellows in total, but none of them are black. So the progression is what I would like to see much more focused on. And there are multiple ways that you can progress at a company like Intel, but a lot of it is just having access to the leaders so that when those jobs that are more meaty, more meaningful, more substantive are available, folks that look like me have an opportunity to compete for those roles. And that comes with access that we typically don't have ready access to those senior executives as our non-diverse peers do. So that's the one place I would say I'd love to see more improvement over the coming years, is the progression into those more senior roles, into the fellows, into the vice presidents, and so on and so forth.
So still this issue of those underlying relationships, if they don't exist.
Everybody has to know a white guy.
Exactly.
It's the only way to get ahead in this world.
That white boy network is strong.
Exactly.
Just saying. We need to break that thing in there somewhere, right? So when I think about the experiences of both you, Sarah, and you, I'm thinking that as women who each have companies that are in this very sort of male space, one of the things that we often hear about is the difficulty of women being able to get venture capital, to be able to grow their companies and get them off the ground in a way that's substantive and you're able to scale and do all that great stuff. What sort of experiences have each of you had with that issue of being able to attract capital and to attract the support that you need to not only launch your businesses, but make them sound and be able to have them grow?
Definitely. So when I started seeking funding, not only am I a Latina, not only am I a female founder, I'm also a solo founder. So a fellow female founder called me the trifecta of difficulty to try to raise venture capital. It does take knowing the white guy, but most importantly, I remember seeking funding when other of my early Twitter employees were seeking funding, and I went up to one of them and he's like, I just got 3 million. And he's like, I know. And I was like, but you don't even have the product. He was still in stealth mode, that's what it's called. So when I raised the 2 million for Atipica about a year ago, 8 months after that, over $30 million was raised around the same concept of data mining, machine learning, around the talent life cycle by white males. To read open a TechCrunch or to go and see that, that where's the competitive advantage, my team is binational, both in Mexico and in Silicon Valley, and to know that I don't even have 1/10 of that money that is being given, it's really hard. We can come up here and tell the horror stories of pitching to rooms full of people that don't look like you. So if there's already some sort of they have their biases, and then you walk in and you have a stereotype thread. Mm-hmm. And the stereotype thread of being a woman of color, pitching in rooms that if we're fighting for diversity in large tech corporations, in venture capital, I think that's a battle that I can't even right now process. Maybe I hope to process it after I exit this company for a large sum of money. And then I can go ahead and do it. Yeah. But I do think that it's one of the most difficult experiences of my life. Every time it's called ABC, always be closing. Or I call it the AVP, they always be pitching, because you're always pitching your company to get more funding. Once you close one round, you go into the other. It is, I think venture capital is one of the places that needs the most disruption. Less than 1% of all venture capital goes towards African American founders. Less than 1%. And imagine women that look like Sarah, even less, I don't know, or myself. There's no statistics because there's not enough of us.
Yeah, we fundamentally don't exist. You're seeing a mirage, basically. No, but it's crazy too, because Silicon Valley is a giant heaping pile of dog shit, but it's like underneath the dog shit, there's just like billions of dollars, so you have to dig through. Unfortunately,
that's an amazing visual. Just have to say,
true. It's really true, and it's. I mean, I know people. I used to work in venture capital, and I know the people who work there, and they are spectacularly, for the most part, 99+% of them are spectacularly meh. Like, they're like, okay, you have a pulse and you're a white dude who wears a button down, you get a job. And quite frankly, the craziest thing about venture capital is how much of it is driven by pattern matching, like Laura was saying, which is not anything other than, I like your idea well enough and I like you a lot. And so what you see, and we were talking about this last night actually, is that when you talk about the 1% of venture capital funding that goes to African Americans, please do not think for a second that's divided 50-50 between men and women. Right. That's divided probably 99% to men and 1% to women. And I know a bunch of guys who are black and run venture capital funds, and they've never invested in black women, and I'm like, okay, like that's a fact, right? Mm-hmm. And you see it sometimes with female-led funds that have invested only in or predominantly in women-led companies or women-led companies by black or by white or Asian women, and it's some of it is just who's pitching and how you get to be able to pitch is a lot of this other. I don't like the idea of a pipeline problem, like people aren't there. I strongly subscribe to the pipeline problem of most people are not being accepted into the pipeline, like they show up and it's like, no, not you exactly. And so there's a huge amount of problem and a huge amount of blame goes even to the very small amount of capital that has found its way to be deployed into women and black and Hispanic men because they're not deploying it into women of color. So there's sort of this Venn diagram, and our kind of overlapping piece of it is just a black hole. And so it's a problem, but it's sort of this weird self-fulfilling prophecy where because so few people get funded, and the starting a tech company in Silicon Valley for the most part is not hard. Kevin Systrom started Instagram when he barely knew how to code, right? It was like his little project to teach himself how to code. He's a biz dev guy, aka relatively worthless, right? And he taught himself how to code, and I'm a biz dev girl, so I can say it. But he taught himself how to code. It's the scaling that's hard, but if you get to the point where you scale, then you get the venture capital because you have the metrics, and then you can hire really smart people who are sitting inside of legacy tech companies or have PhDs to do the hard parts. Starting a tech company is not hard. It's primarily a question of access to capital, right? The $3 an app download that I was talking about, or the money to hire top, PR companies cost you $10,000 a month. Like, you're not gonna find that on a couch, at least on my couch. So when you need to go do those things, right, then you get the PR that gets you the downloads, that gets you on Good Morning America, that gets you recruiters or gets you partners or whatever else to build your company. All of that stuff is strictly just a function of access to capital, right? The guy down the road who's holding 1600 Washington hostage, he is, or whatever the address is, he's largely able to make his money, right, because he already had money. And so once you already have money, if you have $1 million to go buy a building that costs $300,000, you can buy 3 buildings, and if even one of them does kind of okay, you can leverage that interest and that collateral to go buy more buildings and go bankrupt a trillion times, sexually harass a bunch of people and become president. So I'm working on that plan, but the point being that, like, the reason that you don't see more of us is because if you don't fund us, then we literally starve to death and die.
That is true. Okay. Although I will have to say Tony is a conservative Republican on the panel.
Correct.
There's nothing wrong with Republicans until they try to get in my uterus and, like, systemically deny me from human rights. I'm fighting for a tax cut.
Completely agree, but somehow we have drifted way off the path of inclusion in the tech, unless we're like artificially inseminating and growing.
We'll work on that next.
Okay, so Tony.
I have to say, this is part of diversity and inclusion, including someone from the GOP. Okay.
Absolutely, and we appreciate that in all seriousness, because this would be counter-stereotypical, that you would have a conservative Republican holding Apple, who most of us would assume would be a very sort of liberal-leaning, organization, to task around this issue of diversity and inclusion, and they're rebuffing you.
Correct.
So what I find interesting, too, is that you've mentioned that they claim they don't know about the business. Listen,
Correct.
This ain't new, folks, right? This
Correct.
ain't new. I mean, there have been a kabillion studies on this. We know about the premiums associated with having gender diversity. We also know that there are even greater premiums associated with racial diversity in terms of profitability.
Correct.
So what's the real holdup?
It's a level of education, I would say, for everyone, okay, in that regard. The problem, that, as I said before, is that when we're mentioning diversity and inclusion, automatically becomes ethnocentric, a social issue. And you have people within the area, many people that I've met that have been pushing for inclusion and diversity, who are satisfied with just the social aspect. So for instance, when I started this initiative a few years ago, Apple changed their webpage. So they included Denise Young-Smith, who's a VP. At the bottom, of course, she's black. And then they made sure that they pushed Eddie Q, who's Cuban American. And they instilled James Bell into the board of directors. And immediately the legal team of Apple was contacting me, hey, are you happy, this and that? We did this. Of course, you had Reverend Jesse Jackson saying, yeah, I'm happy. I, on the other hand, said, no, that's bullshit. That's tokenism. Give me the real movement. My problem with Apple and Google and all the other companies are the fact that everyone believes in tokenism. Everyone's happy with that, okay? And unfortunately, many of the leaders in the diversity realm are satisfied again with that. So they're not happy to present the business side of it. I received a lot of resistance regarding that matter this past year, okay? And my team, we spent a fortune in public relation firms and stuff like that, and media firms, so we can get the message out there. It's not an inexpensive endeavor, okay? However, you don't have to have an eight-figure salary to do this, but you need to collectively do something. And as we started moving forward again, Apple and the others were saying, well, you should be happy with this. We've done what we need to do, so everyone should be calm. And I said, no, well, we have a problem here. You're opening up yourself up for litigation, or anything else. Look what's happening at Fox News, for example.
Absolutely.
What's happening at Fox News is not exclusive to Fox News.
Right.
It's to every single media company. It's to every single tech company. However, they're focusing on Fox News because it's conservative, quote unquote, this and that. But let's take a company like Apple, who's socially progressive, okay, and they love to give the talk and the walk and all this kind of stuff, giving the opportunities to women and men and everyone else of color. However, there's resistance once you reach middle management. You cannot break that glass ceiling. It's almost resistant to anything. And in this endeavor now, what we're pushing for is to go from the top down. Let's knock it all down. Give me the reason why you don't have a person of color as a senior VP over the past 15 years, except for just one person. Over the past history of 41 years, maybe 2 or 3 people of color have reached the C-suite. When you have a gap of 19 years in the board of director and appointing someone who's black or Hispanic or anything, which hasn't occurred yet of Hispanic board of directors, and you're satisfied with just, well, we appointed an Asian American, we have a black American now. Yeah, but there was a gap of 19 years. Why? Are you telling me that there's not sufficient people of color out there to get to the C-suite? This excuse of the pipeline, I can accept at the lower levels when it comes to STEM education. But when you're talking about the senior level, EVPs and CEOs and everything else, and board of directors, how dare you say that we have a pipeline issue? There's plenty of people of color with great education, plenty of experience, and plenty of money, because we have money, okay? But for some strange reason, they refuse us. And I don't understand why. It's not an issue. It might be the issue of the bro culture where they all grew up and they all started their companies together and they grew together. However, there's no excuse in today, not in the 21st century in that regard. So I would say that there's further need of education overall, because again, with this proposal, I was hearing from many people, well, it's tokenism, it's affirmative action, that's what you're calling for. No, are you not bothering to read what's in black and white? Because the problem we're getting right now, we're getting again into the social issue where people are screaming so much that they're stuck in the gray area. When really this is just a clear issue of black and white. It's on paper.
Absolutely. So what's the excuse? And do you think that's just their excuse?
It's creonism, right? Like you appoint people, you give people that are unqualified the position of authority or power, and that's what happens. And when you do it once, you're going to follow the pattern matching. You're going to hire at Facebook at that C level, then you're going to hire them at Uber, then you're going to hire them at every single, at Snapchat, you're going to keep hiring them. And when I tell people why I left big tech companies, YouTube, Twitter, I say, I didn't hit just the glass ceiling, I hit a glass door. Like I was cut. So I was caught in this bubble. And then there's the microaggressions, there's outright sexism and racism, but I think advancement is one of those things that it is the hardest to see. And coming, I think, from big tech companies not having, I know, thankfully in Silicon Valley, I know 3 CIOs who are Latino. The CIO of Facebook, the CIO of Hewlett Packard, and the CIO of Cisco are all Latinos. And I tell them, what are you doing now to lift up now the Latina woman? And they just laugh all the time because they're like, we knew you were going to bring this up, Laura. So I think it goes into the pipeline issue as Ron is trying to advocate into the younger generations, and then we meaning me, is holding my Latino brothers accountable to also lift us up there or to provide us with those opportunities at the C level. But I do agree with you. I think that there is no pipeline issue when you get to certain levels and everything looks the same. It's creonism at its worst.
So Ron, could I ask you a quick question here? Just interact with the entire panel. Now, I'm an educated person. I have a certain number of a good net worth. And I'm looking at the business side of this. Why is it that I'm the first person to ever bring up such a proposal to a company? I'm 50 years old come January, and even in the public realm, I would like to ask, why has it taken so long for one person to bring this up publicly to them and demand this?
I mean, I would guess that you're probably not. Like, I spend a lot of time with Jesse Jackson and his team and like the stuff they've done with Intel, and it's not so much of it. Everybody in Silicon Valley, they're like the most fragile little white dudes I've ever met in my life. And so you like cannot even come at them from the side. You have to like creep up from behind to get anything done. And so I think a lot of times these conversations take place behind several layers of closed doors. I think that bringing it on a shareholder basis and bringing it out into the open is smart, and I think that some people need to do that, and it's awesome you're doing that. But I would not think that you're probably the first person to ever come up with the idea when there are like reams of paper that would fill this room 20 times over.
No, I'm speaking of the fact that just
business case.
as far as on the shareholder level,
Shareholders.
why has it taken so long for one person to bring this up? It's been proven that this is actually the first proposal of its shape to actually make such a demand of a corporation.
Yeah,
Well, your universe are shareholders. I mean,
Correct.
that's the challenge right
Correct.
there. But Ron, I would love to sort of bring you in because I found it very interesting that you said that Intel was like your first but then after that you hit the wall. So there is clearly a resistance. I mean, you're solving the pipeline problem that they all claim that they have.
Right.
You're providing
Right.
an answer to that solution. So is the issue is they just don't want a solution to the pipeline?
Well, most people who look at this issue say that it's two-barreled. You've got this issue or their complaints about the pipeline. There's not enough minorities and women in the pipeline. And there's some truth to that. We have to do a better job as a society to convince more of our men and women to go into STEM education, to come out with a degree. Okay, be that as it may. But the real issue, in my opinion, having seen it internally as an employee and executive in high tech, as well as now trying to work with some of those people from the outside, it is very, very much a systemic problem in terms of the employment process. Ironically, it was many, many years ago, before most of the young people in this audience were even born, but I actually interned here in Washington, D.C. for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And that commission at that time was on a warpath about word-of-mouth recruiting. The old practice of, Tom knows John, play golf together, that whole thing. You've heard it time and time again. And we went through a period of time where the application process was very much the opposite. But I think we've returned to that. And I think the advent of online applications, all the young Latino men and women tell me that when they press that submit button or apply button, whatever it is now, they feel that their resume goes into a dark hole.
Absolutely.
Sure.
It's lost in the cloud. They are never called upon because they don't have that white guy friend. They didn't go to the same colleges that those guys went to. And I'm saying guys on purpose because she's absolutely right. They're all guys. Now try to imagine the role I have coming in from the outside of trying to convince these people that they don't know what the hell they're doing. And they have their, excuse me, I don't want to offend anyone in the audience, but they have their diversity inclusion people and they have this and that. But oftentimes that's an excuse. That's a place to send me.
Correct.
Send me for 9 months. I was in one company working with this person, and I'm not selling a new concept, a new idea, a product. I'm not asking them to invest in me. I'm asking them to invest in their future workforce. And after 9 months of working with one particular company and finally getting the answer I needed to have, a yes or a no, they said, no, we don't do scholarships. And it was ironically that same day,
Yeah.
I got the newspaper on my desk talking about front page story of their company, how for 2 years they've gained no numbers. Now, when I worked in high tech, if I had that position, I'd be out the door. I'm sorry.
Right.
But for some reason, when the top executives, when it comes to this issue, it's, it's like a golf score. Well, I shot 100 today. Okay, well, try for 90 tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, I shot 105 today. Okay, well, try for 90 tomorrow. And so where are the enforcers? Where is the federal government? Where is the state governments around affirmatively acting to get a diverse workforce? They seem to be absent.
Yeah.
When was the last time you heard someone was sued for racial discrimination, for gender discrimination, and actually won the case? So we need to approach this from a lot of different areas, and certainly our foundation has decided we don't influence, we don't have no power over the hiring process, so we're going to take away this excuse that there's no one in the pipeline. And remember, high tech hires more than just engineers.
Correct.
Reverend Jesse Jackson has talked about this. You hire finance people, you hire HR people, you hire marketing people, you hire a lot of other people.
Correct.
All right? And the other thing I would mention too, in terms of what can public policy do around this issue, when I first joined Hewlett-Packard in 1979, not only did that company and many other companies in Silicon Valley manufacture their own products, but they did it right there in Silicon Valley. I worked in a product division of 2,500 people. We had a manufacturing line. I worked in HR. I hired probably 100 manufacturing employees right out of high school into those jobs. And guess what? They took advantage, they're smart. They took advantage of the company's tuition reimbursement program. They got their 2-year college degree. Then they went on and got a bachelor's degree in engineering or computer science. They became an engineer. They worked up. That was when there was a career ladder in high tech.
Okay.
And then in the 90s, the world changed, everybody offshore jobs, and the first couple rungs of that ladder were chopped off. So when people like us now want to work in that industry, you can't just walk in and get a manufacturing job. You got to get 4 years, 5 years for most Latinos, because they don't have the universities we go to don't have the right number of engineering classes, so it takes now 5 years, you come out with debt, the whole thing. So I'm all for public policy that gives tax incentives to bring back manufacturing jobs to the U.S. Not just in high tech, but in everywhere. Because that's how we're going to really change the funnel. Because they're no longer be able to say, we can't find them. Yes, you can. They're right out there.
How are you going to send robots to
They're
college?
30 feet from your desk, right?
How are you going to send robots to college, though?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
you hire people to build robots.
We're about to go to the audience in just
okay.
a minute or so, but just if I could have everyone just really quickly, 15, 20 seconds, give me your
Lightning
top,
round?
yeah, lightning round, your top-notch to-do list for the tech industry to actually bring about substantive change.
Hire people who aren't white dudes.
Invest in women and minorities when they need it most, when they are chasing their dream. You don't have to convince them. They're out there. But they're all by themselves on a lot of campuses throughout this country. Absolutely. And they don't just need your money. They need mentors. They need people pushing them, shoving them, pulling them through the system, convincing them they can do it.
Honestly, I just need your money.
Yeah. Well, that's the first thing.
Got it. Great, Tony.
I think to destroy the myth that there are no people of color who are qualified to fill the positions in the C-suite.
Hello.
That would
Thank
be my
you.
goal.
Absolutely. Yes.
Tech is the biggest wealth creator in the whole nation. And to not be part of that wealth creation, it is the number one, I call it economic apartheid. We won't be part of that. And so we need to really focus on that, on making sure that our youth are not just consumers, but they are creators, and that's the path that they need to take.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with Laura. It's not only a business imperative. We're not just consumers, but we are going to be the creators of these technologies and these solutions. But it's a moral imperative. It's the right thing to do.
I agree.
Do it.
Absolutely. It's morally right, but also it's fiscally right.
Correct.
It makes
Absolutely.
sense. Absolutely. So we're going to open it up at this point for questions. If you raise your hand, we'll have someone to come to you we have in the back, and we'll work our way up.
Good morning, and thank you for your comments. My name is Chichi Nakwe. I'm a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow working at the National Science Foundation. I really appreciate the way that you've articulated all the challenges that we have to face. And my question is focusing on how are we scaling? So there are federal initiatives across the National Science Foundation as well as the National Institutes of Health that focus on STEM education. And what I want to know is how are we bringing a connection to those organizations, those universities, those organizations like SACNAS to this space? Because as you were saying, the scientists and engineers from underrepresented groups are out there, but what can we do nationally to scale and connect all of us?
Who'd like to take that question?
Well, I think one of the things that we face on the solution side is, and it's not just a funding issue for companies. It's a funding issue for those of us working on solutions. I spend 80% of my time raising money. And most of it's from the same companies year after year. So why doesn't one of those companies say, you know what, we believe, just like Intel did, we believe so strongly in this, and we recognize it's not going to be solved overnight. We recognize that we've ignored this issue for decades. We can't solve it in 3 quarters. So let's give the Hispanic Foundation of Silicon Valley a 5-year financial commitment. So I can spend less of my time raising money and more of my time investing in those students. Let's put the money where the mouth is. Let's walk the talk. Let's recognize this is a big time investment that's going to be needed to turn all this around.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll add that most of us are very competitive people. right? We don't like to lose. And one of the things that we noticed when Intel announced its EEO data is that some competitors, some other companies in the Valley it put pressure on them to do the same. And once you can get the data out there and you can have a conversation about this disparity and what are we going to do to fix the disparity, it's pretty powerful. So I think encouraging and pushing the companies to release that data to show how the pay parity between men and women, to see how are they recruiting underrepresented minorities, how are they recruiting women, how does that compare with the broader population that they have, and then you can have some real interesting conversations about how you fix the problem.
Mm-hmm. Very, very important.
Yes. The other thing I'll add very quickly is there's another issue, and there's been a lot of articles and TV programming around this recently in Silicon Valley, is that a lot of companies, they feel like the recruitment is, once they get part of that done, they kind of, okay, we've got it accomplished. But the second secret of this industry is the very poor retention of these men and women of color. And there are a lot of reasons for that, far too many to get into here. But there's a lack of organizational culture change, where these people feel welcomed, they're promoted, and they feel like, yeah, I'm going to stick with this company. Research shows, by the way, that Latinos are incredibly loyal to companies who give them an opportunity and reward, success and performance. So there's a lot of issues that have to be dealt with.
So that's the equity and inclusion side of the coin that oftentimes goes neglected.
Absolutely.
There were several other hands in the air. So the mics are coming, you guys, sorry. So right here and then up in the top.
Go.
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go.
I thought you had a not. Raise your hands again, please. I thought there was a hand over
Hi,
there.
my name is Kristen Bryant.
Perfect.
I work for a small nonprofit called Commonwealth. We focus on building financial solutions for financially vulnerable folks. My question is really about a comment that you made talking about how young students just don't know that these jobs exist, particularly in high school. What are some opportunities in terms of companies really going out and raising the visibility that these career paths exist? And do you know of any companies that are doing that, or any other nonprofits, organizations in general, who are increasing the awareness of these career paths? Because I think a lot of kids just don't know. They don't know. Their whole network is people who work in their communities and may not have these particular types of jobs.
I'm going to have to disagree with Ron about that, about kids not knowing. I know a lot, and I think Sarah would attest to it. We know a lot of people that are established as a side job or as a real full-time job. Black Girls Code, Hack the Hood, Latinas in STEM, even and Facebook, and every single company first goes into the pipeline of youth issue. And so they'll have their own programs, whether they're going to Oakland or they're going to East Palo Alto. I do think that there are, but it's so hyper-located into just the Bay Area. So, and not everything is going to be in the Bay Area. I think I met someone in the audience at Women of Color in STEM in Arizona because of that thing. I want to get out of the Silicon Valley and the bubble that we're gonna create. And so we really need to step outside. Even though I do agree that there is some disparities, there is so much money being put into all of these programs or the efforts of nonprofits as well.
I think if I could add to this, a lot of companies like Apple, Intel, Google, they are giving money, okay? They're giving millions of dollars to national groups, and that's where the problem lies. Because we're giving to national groups, these groups decide which schools will get that. And unfortunately, local groups like Ron's, for instance, gets ignored because Apple, for instance, would just say, well, you know what, we gave to the Hispanic Society of whatever, in Washington, D.C., and let them deal with it. That's not our problem anymore. If we can actually narrow that down and say, well, maybe they should contribute maybe 20% to the national groups, and then the other 80%, throughout local neighborhoods and stuff like that, I think that will make improvements. I would agree with Laura that as far as the education of our children, they are aware of it. A lot of children are aware of this. However, they don't know exactly what are the opportunities. And again, with going along with what I'm arguing with, as a shareholder, I think it was very important to bring this out Because if we don't have those people up there, people of color in power, then our children won't have anyone to emulate. So if they don't have them there for mentorship, if they don't have them there for leadership or guidance, then they're just going to say, well, what's the point? Why do I want to code? I don't want to work in tech. I'm never going to get anywhere.
I guess part of that question also is just that I feel like it's a lack of a connection to someone that you actually know that's in that role versus I could be educated about, you know, coding something.
I mean, most people don't know a professional basketball player, but most kids know that that's a career path. So,
Right.
you know.
Okay. There were other, yes, over here, and then we're going to bring that microphone up to towards the front, if that's okay.
Thank you to the power panel. You all are amazing. I'm Sondra Davis, Sage Financial Solutions. I train coaches, and we work in the asset building field. Congratulations on name change, D2D. So I'm in the Bay Area, and as you all have mentioned, there is a lot of information. There's a lot of people doing great work. You know, I'm in the same building with Kimberly, Black Girls Code. We're doing a project called Oakland Promise, and the idea of that is to start seeding CSAs, Children's Savings Account, when babies are born, Medi-Cal eligible, and are in a home visiting program. So it's part of this Oakland Promise. It's a wonderful program that goes over the course of years. The challenge is exactly what I feel like you said, is that knowing and then doing and then sustaining people knowing where folks who look like them are going and staying. Right. I think a lot of people who find the glass ceiling or the glass door or whatever leave. Right. And, and I think that that's part of the challenge. And so what I'm wondering, what are we going to say to these young people who go from brilliant baby to kindergarten to college to future centers, how to get there and stay there, and what do they do to be able to stay once they get in, and to know whether or not that means, hey, you know what, I'm not going to join a big corporation, I'm going to do my own thing. But how do we get people to get in there and stay? How do we build that?
I don't think it's an issue of getting people to come in. Again, it's a problem of they will leave after middle management, okay? Well, what I'm doing, which is basically challenging them on the business side. As an investor, and anyone can do this, to be quite honest, you can buy $2,000 worth of share on any company, you can start a shareholder initiative, okay, and bring it to their attention. It's the only way we can do it. Because unfortunately, at the C-suite, there are very few people of color in all the tech companies. Okay, it's not a problem in finance. It's not a problem in other industries, but in the tech industry, it happens to be. So what we need to do is continue to put this pressure, and to put the pressure on the business side, not just on the social ethnic side, which is of course something apropos that we need to do, but we need to hit them on the social aspect, on the economic aspect of this. So
even then, the toxic cultures, and you read in the magazines and you see the headlines, and Fox News looks like nothing compared to what the Ubers of the world and the Googles, and the fact that these toxic cultures are affecting the people of color all the time, that it goes into a depression, a suicide of a black engineer, or it goes into a woman having to write a blog post. So I do think that it has to do with the economic side, but it has to do with the humane side of keeping your employees engaged and inclusion, and trying to remove those layers of toxicity. And also finding allies in there, because we can't find this battle by ourselves. We're going to need the allies of the white men. We're going to need the allies of the white women and the Asians, and et cetera. So that allyship is really important, and I think that is emerging from this toxic headlines that we're reading about.
I think when you're talking about specifically programs, right, that these kids, especially in Oakland, so it'll be like really granular. I think some of it too is prepping people, right, and explaining, because there's this cognitive dissonance in Silicon Valley that will literally drive you insane. Where I was sitting at a dinner, a very small invite-only dinner with one of some of the fanciest people in tech in the world, like billionaire status, and this guy's going on and on and on about diversity and how important it is in the future and how he's so different from the white dudes because he's an Indian dude. And I was like, how many women are on your diversity team? Or how many female women are on your investing team? He's like, 2 of 11. And what I didn't know at the time is one of them was his wife, right? And so that cognitive, hey man. As Gloria Steinem said, sleeping your way to the top was easy, more people would do it. But, one of the things is that once you acknowledge that, you don't feel crazy. And if somebody basically just says, like, honestly, I would tell these kids, I'll come talk to these kids, and I'll tell them slightly less graphic terms, it's going to suck. and you're going to be gaslit, you're going to be passed over because you're not a dude. You might want to start listening to like EDM or something horrible so you feel like you can fit in and wearing hoodies and like, but not like in like a, you know, but be careful because black people get killed for wearing hoodies, and white people become billionaires. So laying out that reality, I think, can be really helpful, because then they go in, like if you got thrown into, like what's the difference between basic training and jail, right? Like on some level, almost nothing, but it's the preparation and it's what you know you're signing up for. And to some extent, and this definitely happens as a woman, right? Every woman knows this. You don't just get to decide that like rape culture is over and you won't deal with it anymore. You have to adapt within it while also fighting against it. And I think that that's one thing that a lot of minorities we know that intellectually, but with tech it's so frustrating because it's new and they're like selling us such a load of bullshit that we forget to do this sometimes, is really come in and say, look guys, like it is going to suck. You're not going to be promoted at the same levels. You're not going to get the same opportunities. Here's how to work around that. Like when you're getting hired at a good company, here's how to be aggressive about tuition reimbursement or getting shares, getting equity in the company, because it's going to be, you know, it's probably going to be worth a lot in the future, and you shouldn't think that you're going to get promoted up through the ranks because you probably won't. Here's how to prepare for the realities. And I think that the more you can do that, the more when these kids do get in, be they, you know, pushed out or leave of their own volition, they'll be in a better financial situation more than anything, because the golden rule is true. He has the gold makes the rules. If you can get these kids into companies relatively early on, they can get a little bit of money, they can make some connections, they can then leave and start their own companies or go to a friendlier sector. That money they make while they're in tech does matter, and that name on a resume does matter. So it's just preparing them for battle. It's not trying to tell them you're going to thrive here. It's telling them here's how to survive here.
Okay, I'm sorry, we're almost out of time. I want to see if we have a couple of more hands. If we could just quickly, like 10 seconds, each of you, I think it's like 2 or 3 of you, just say your questions really quickly, and then we'll do a quick wrap up and try to address them.
I'll try to be real quick.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Angel Rich. I'm one of the top 30 Black female founders in the country, named by Google. I create financial literacy games. I was the spokesperson for the Intel Power More Fund, as well as Wells Fargo. So my question was around best practices for being aggressive to reduce tokenism. I've never had a conversation with Wells Fargo or Intel, yet I'm in the commercial to promote the Power Fund and other type of different things. So how, once you reach a certain level, do you kind of alleviate those things but don't sue them or stuff like that? You just need to be aggressive.
Important question. We're going to try to squeeze in a couple more. Yes.
Hi, my name is Deborah Owens. I'm with Owens Media Group, and we build financial wellness programs and financial education programs, and I've been like on this journey to an app to get funding for 5 years, and now I feel like, oh my God, now I know. I'm not imagining this. But my question really goes to Tony. As someone coming out of the investment industry, I think your approach in terms of shareholder advocacy, if you will, is critical. But my thought was, from a business imperative, if we look at Fox, what we saw was that didn't change until advertisers started fleeing, right? Correct. So at the end of the day, it really is a business imperative. So my question really is, should that be the approach? Should it be not only policy, you can only change culture if you can impact there is some financial incentive, and would that financial incentive really be not only from a shareholder side, but from a consumer side? So that's the question.
Okay, so quick questions about tokenism, addressing tokenism, and being able to shift the culture via putting economic pressure on from the outside.
Correct. Well, let me go in reverse. I would say that putting economic pressure, that would be great. However, who's going to stop using an iPhone? No one will. And because of the fact that we're offshoring all our work in manufacturing, that's going to be very difficult, to be quite honest. So how can we influence them? Well, India's doing that at this given stage by demanding that they manufacture in India. So that's a start. By putting that attention to Apple and other companies to say, look, these are the people around the world that are going to demand the same thing that we're demanding. So either you do it now, or you're going to do it later, or face the legal consequences. So that's that regard. Regarding tokenism at the top, I think one of the issues we have is that many people don't want to step up to the plate neither, because you're going to have that stigma. Did I get hired because I'm Black or Hispanic or whatever? Do I have that position because of this? It's a dilemma for anyone who's actually being promoted, who's lucky enough to get promoted. So what you're going to have to do at that given stage is to have someone who's brave enough to say, screw it, I'm just going to do it.
Absolutely.
And I did it for my own reasons. And we're all going to have to support that person and continue to push for people to do that. So you will have to be not aggressive, but assertive. And that's the way you have to do it.
I don't think you can avoid tokenism. Like Tim Cook, if you see a list of top gay people in the world, Tim Cook is at the front of that list, right? If you see a list of top women, you know, business leaders, you see Mary Barra on the list. Those people aren't where they're at because of their gender or sexuality, but there's always going to be that level of like, oh, we want to hold you up, and at the same time, if we don't hold you up, then you're not there. And so I think you just have to like know that you're there for the right reasons and shut out the noise and take the free press,
Yeah,
I would say.
And frankly, I don't think it matters how you got there. It's what you do when you get
Yeah.
there. So.
Correct.
And I would just say, sorry, dear, given who inhabits 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, I don't want to ever hear anything about qualifications ever again in life.
Exactly.
All right, so on that note, we have run over. My apologies. I know there were a few more questions, and I'm sure this amazing panel will be around where you can sort of snatch them aside individually. Thank you so much for your attention today.
Thank you. Good job.